Hey y'all, I'm Lauren and welcome to Cantina Cast. Today I'm talking about Hard Contact by Karen Travis. This is the first book in the Republic Commando series. This was released back in 2004, which was before Disney acquired Lucasfilm, so this book is Legends, which means that it's technically not canon, and it kind of can be viewed as like an alternative universe. However, don't let that stop you from reading this because this was an absolutely incredible read, and I can't wait to continue on with this series because I was just super moved by this book. This first book of the series covers a group of clones called the Omega Squad, and they're on a mission together and they get separated and they end up having to try to find each other again. And one of the clones ends up having the help of a Jedi that he runs into that helps him do this. And the way that this story covers the clones and the Jedi that's also kind of mixed up in what they're doing, it really the characterization is just really incredible in terms of what Karen Travis is doing here. She really has a skill for catching those really subtle moments and showing those character relationships as they're happening. And this whole story, it just takes place over a few days, but we cover so much ground in terms of what it means to be a clone. Their sense of mortality is a lot different from a normal person. Are clones human? Are clones children? How do the clones relate to each other? How do they view the situation that they've been forced into? And then also, what does that mean for the Jedi as well? How do the Jedi come to terms with what's happening to the clones? And so we do get to look at all of those different issues from the perspective of the clones and also the perspective of one Jedi. And weirdly enough, I mean, of course, we're covering issues about clones and Jedi, but there were times that I was reading this that it didn't really feel like a Star Wars book. And I think this is the first time I've ever said that and actually meant it in a good way. I mean, usually I like it when things feel like Star Wars, of course, because I love Star Wars. But in this case, Karen Travis's writing, it was really refreshing just in terms of the way that she looks at these specific issues that we've seen looked at in other places in Star Wars canon, but her touch and her spin on these things, I really found it to be really special. Her tone is just a little bit different than a lot of the Star Wars books that I've read before. There's kind of sort of a grim quality, especially to the perspective of the clones that she captures really well. And just the way that they have to come to terms with if they accept their lot in life or not. I'm really excited to continue on with this series because I was super impressed with the first book. There were times when I was reading this that I was deeply moved emotionally, especially the parts where the clones are kind of thinking about just the way that their lives are going to be, the way that their lives were predestined, and the way that they are probably going to end. I just feel like the writing in this book, it captures these really difficult, emotional, complex issues in just such a great way. And she kind of does it with a subtlety where she's not overstating anything. She's not like hitting you over the head with these things. It happens in the smallest moments. And to me, that's just like the best type of writing is when it's happening in those small moments and the reader's actually seeing kind of the thought process behind some of those things. This book also might be a good one if you're thinking about trying out Legends and you don't know what to start with. If you like prequel era, this might be a good Legends book to start with. It is the first book in a series. But this first book, it didn't feel like it was like overtly conflicting with anything in canon to where it's gonna like be confusing or difficult to keep track of. It seems like it kind of fits in well with some of the other things that we know are going on in canon. So, for that reason, it might be a good one to start with. I am going to start talking about plot details and spoilers now. So, if you're considering reading this book and you don't want to hear spoilers, now is your time to turn back. So, at the start of this book, we have Omega Squad, which has been brought together. And they are all clones who have lost the rest of their squads. In fact, Darman, the leader of this squad, he lost the rest of his original squad on their very first mission. And so it's a bunch of people that are all the sole survivors of their squads that have been brought together to form this new squad. And these clones are called Republic Commandos, and they're a type of specialized clone that is specifically engineered to be a little bit more advanced than the typical clones that you would see. They're not the highest tier of special ops, but they are up there. So our four clones that are part of the squad are Darman. He's like our main clone character that we're following in this book. And then we also have Niner, Phi, and Aten. And Omega Squad's first mission together is they are being sent to a planet called Kilara, where they have to find a research facility where a separatist scientist is developing a nanovirus that is meant to target clones. So they need to find the facility, destroy the virus, all of that. On their way to the mission, they crash land on the planet, and three of the clones, the other three, are separated from Darman. So a lot of this book is them trying to find each other again. Already on Quilara is Etain. She's a Jedi Padawan who was separated from her master. She's assuming that he was killed. And she was originally already on this planet to try to collect intel on this situation. But now she's just by herself. She's wandering around trying to survive, trying to figure out a way off the planet, just trying to figure out what to do next, but she hasn't made a lot of progress yet. Another key character on this planet is Gez Hoken. He is a Mandalorian sort of warlord type figure. And he does have a boss named Ankit, but it kind of seems like Hogan is really the one calling all the shots. He's kind of like the enforcer of what the group in power wants to go down on Kilara. So he's evil, he's scary. He's pretty much like the main antagonist in this book that the clones are up against. So after Omega Squad crash lands on the planet, the rest of the clones they try to go find Darman. And there is some debate at first about like the different opinions about if they should go find him versus if they should just continue the mission without him. And this is one of those moments where I feel like Karen Travis just expertly captures what it means to be a clone. As we're seeing them have this conversation, you're kind of getting a taste of like these different sorts of opinions and these different sorts of perspectives that they have. But ultimately, what they decide is that Darman is a brother. And so, because of that, they have to go find him. And it's interesting because they don't know Darman at this point. They just met him like right before this mission. But because he's a clone, he's their brother and they treat him as such. So Darman is off by himself, also trying to survive. While he's trying to find the rest of the squad, he ends up in multiple situations where he has to decide if he's either going to go with his programming or if he is going to be human. And ultimately, what this book shows us is that the clones, of course, are human. And we see a lot of those moments with Darman trying to make these types of decisions. Like a big example of this is there's a moment where he sees some citizens being hurt, and he has to decide if he's going to interfere and help them, which is what he wants to do, or if he's going to go forward with the mission, which is what he should do, or at least what he feels he should do based on his programming and his training on Camino. But a lot of times we do end up seeing that Darman does make the more human decision in these types of moments. There's another really great scene where Darman, as he's making his way across the countryside of this planet, he's noticing all of the natural beauty of the landscape around him. And for the first time, he's really actually looking at it as beautiful instead of just war terrain, which is what he was trained to do. And so that's just another great human moment that Karen Travis captures just through the eyes of this character. So eventually, Darman and Etain, they cross paths and they fight. And Darman easily wins, which Etain is not a fan of. And Darman explains to her that she's their commander. And this is what the Jedi do now. This is also the first time that Etain has heard this. So she does not take it well because this is kind of like a shock to the system. And she even tells him, don't call her commander. And she does struggle in this book to try to piece together kind of what exactly Darman is and what that means, because she ultimately kind of comes to the conclusion that it's an affront to the Force that these clones were created in this way for this purpose. But Etain does give Darman the intelligence that she's gathered while already on this planet. And what they discover is that the other clones, they're headed towards a separatist base not the research facility. So pretty much they were given bad intel at the start of the mission. So they have to go find the other clones, and now it's pretty time sensitive because they have to find them before they get to the separatist base. And so we spend some time now with Etain and Darman making their way through the countryside looking for the other clones, also trying to survive and avoid Hoken, who was on their tail pretty much the whole time. And their dynamic with each other is so interesting because there's a lot of times in this book where Etain comes across like just a rude teenager. I mean, she is a Padawan after all. And also we have Darman, who is just genuinely doing his best, and the two of them butt heads quite a lot in the beginning. And Etain just doesn't get it. She's not malicious, but she just has a lot to learn. She's just early in her training. She's very unsure of herself as a Jedi. She's now been confronted with this big thing that she has to try to make sense of, the role of the clones and her part in that. And she just doesn't take it well at first. And her and Darman, they kind of don't trust each other in the beginning, but over time, they do earn each other's trust. And it turns out that both of them, I mean, they couldn't really survive and complete the mission without the other one. Another key character in this book is named Jennart, and she is a shapeshifter species called Urgura Linen. And this species is indigenous to Quilara, and she is also kind of like an undercover part of this mission. And we actually don't find that out until later in the book, but she's responsible for giving Etain and Darman a lot of key information that ends up really helping them. For example, she does know what Hoken is up to and that he's onto them. She also gives them information for where they can find the rest of Omega Squad. So she's a really big part of this mission. And she's really dedicated to the success of this mission. Because her people are indigenous to this planet, they really want the separatists to leave and they want the Republic to leave too. So her people pretty much cut a deal with the Republic and were like, okay, we will help you if once you're successful and the separatists are gone, you leave too, and you just leave us alone. And so that is why this is so important to Gen Art, that it is successful. And this is something that it sounds like is probably going to come up later on in this series as well. Meanwhile, Hoken finds the remains that the rest of Omega Squad left behind when they encountered some battle droids and fought them. And so now he knows that the Republic has sent people to the planet, and he suspects they're after the research facility. So he has this plan where he wants to relocate the scientist, and he's kind of trying to create a diversion to lead them in the wrong direction. And he even changes his mind a few times throughout the book about what exactly the diversion is going to be. Something else he's done too is he has incentivized the locals to report any Jedi or clone activity that they see. So not only is Hoken following them, but now citizens are also keeping an eye out as well. And by incentivized, I mean he has threatened them. So, I mean, even though it sucks that there's times that the citizens do report them, it, it's kind of understandable because he threatened their lives, so they kind of don't have a choice. But as Etain and Darman are successfully navigating the countryside, they are earning each other's trust, and they're both becoming more and more confident in the other person's abilities and gaining respect for each other. We also learn that Etain is pretty good at Jedi mind trick, and we see her get better at this skill throughout the book as they go through different encounters with people that are chasing them. And also through their interactions with each other, we're getting more incredibly written moments where it's just like the little things that just show how different the two of them are. Another really great example of a scene like this is there's a time where Darman has this fruit that he has saved for God knows how long because he doesn't usually get to eat good food. He's usually just eating ration packs. And there's a moment where he feels like it's worthy of, it's time to eat the fruit because he's so hungry pretty much. And he takes the fruit out and he offers Etain some, but she can tell that this piece of fruit really means a lot to him. And so she refuses. She doesn't take it. She just lets him have it. And just the weight of that moment of how much this something that seems like something so small, but to Darman it's a big deal just because of the type of life that he has to have. But he was still willing to offer that to Etain because that is how much he respects just the people that he's working with on his missions, whether it be other clones or Jedi. And something that Attain realizes through her time with Darman is that she feels sorry for herself all the time, and she's always feeling unsure of herself and frustrated with herself. And Darman never feels sorry for himself. He never blames other people for the situation that he's in, even though he has way more grounds to than she does. And so once she puts that together and sees that, she's really moved by that. Eventually, they do find the rest of Omega Squad, and they all know now that Hoken is trying to trick them about where the facility and the scientists are. And so they're kind of trying to out strategize him. And just like Attain grows closer to Darman, the same thing happens once she's around the other clones. She quickly becomes friends with all of them. She sees them all as individuals. She sees them as fully humans, not just as clones. And she really feels the weight of the responsibility for them. And towards the end of the book, we do see that she finally does start to accept the title of commander because of how much her relationship with Omega Squad means to her. Jinart helps them. Basically, she leads them to the research facility underground through this type of animal tunnel system that was already created by some of the animals on the planet. So she leads them through that to the research facility so the clones are able to break in undetected. So once they get in, they set a bunch of explosives. They're able to destroy the virus and they do capture the scientist alive. And after all this happens, they're trying to make their way to the extraction point, and there is a lot of close calls on their way to the extraction point. And the gunship is coming to pick them up, but Niner and Phi got held up because they are confronting Hoken. And Master Zay, that is the Jedi that arrived on the gunship to pick them up, he threatens to leave Niner and Phi behind, and Etain just absolutely can't stand that. She refuses to go with him, and she actually leaves. And when she does this, she's fully aware of the fact that she's risking being able to continue with her Jedi training by disobeying orders. But she's like, I don't care. I cannot leave them. Like, I will not be able to live with myself if I leave them. I don't care what it costs me. I have to stay. And it turns out that Master Zay was testing her, which that sucks. That's a pretty emotional test, but she did pass the test, I guess. And so she runs off to go help them. And what's happening is that Niner and Phi, one of them is playing dead to try to lure Hoken over to them so that way they can kill him. And so when they're doing that, Etain sneaks up behind Hoken and she's the one that kills him. And something that's really interesting about this scene is that up until this point, Hoken, I mean, he's totally evil. He's killing innocent people. I mean, he's a bad guy. But when he thinks that one of the clones is dying and he hears the fake death scream, even he is deeply disturbed by what's going on and the fact that this is what the clone has been subjected to. Like, he's really troubled by this concept of who the clones are and what their purpose is, just like Etain is. Even this evil guy, he is still able to recognize the injustice of what the clones have to go through. So after this happens, Etain, Niner, and Phi, they all go back to the extraction point, and this is where Master Zay tells her that he is going to stay to keep helping the Gurlinans. So that's Jinart and her people. And he's going to help them with fulfilling what the Republic agreed to do in exchange for their help. And so he gives Etain a choice. So this is like another test where he's like, you can either go with Omega Squad, where you may or may not even be paired with them again. We don't know. Or you can stay on Quilara with me, and then you definitely won't see Omega Squad again because Omega Squad is leaving. And Etain has to make a choice. And this is really tough for her because she's very attached to Omega Squad now. And they're her friends. And she has to try to figure out what she's going to do. And ultimately, she does decide to make the Jedi choice and stay on Quilara with Master Zay and say goodbye to Omega Squad and most particularly Darman, that's the hardest goodbye for her. And at the end of this book, when she's saying her goodbyes and we don't know if she's going to see any of them again, it really becomes clear that the clones taught Etain everything she knows. I mean, she was a Jedi Padawan, but she really didn't fully come into her own until her time with Omega Squad. Now she's a lot more sure of herself. Now she's even better at Jedi mind trick than she was before. She started off pretty much incompetent and feeling like she had no abilities, no skills whatsoever, but by the end of this mission, she believes in herself a lot more. And she's pretty much learned who she is and what she's capable of because of their friendship. And so the bond that was created between Etain and the squad was just so powerful because they kind of taught her how to be a better Jedi and they're not even Jedi. So I just thought that that connection was so cool. And I really only covered the highlights, of course. There's just so many, just like some of the scenes that I've just briefly mentioned, there's so many really great, powerful scenes like that in this book. So if you're at all interested in clones or the prequel era or the Clone War or anything of that timeline in Star Wars, I definitely recommend diving into this series because it was just an incredible read and I just really can't wait to continue on with it. So if you've read this one before, let me know in the comments what you thought of it. And thanks so much for watching, y'all. I hope that y'all have a great rest of your day. Bye, guys.